Here are some characteristics of how they learn, and you can understand almost immediately how and why it is that the technology is making this possible. They are learning in 10 to 15-minute sprints. And we know this, don't we? I mean, if I'm Googling, and if after 10 to 15 minutes I'm using the same search terms and the same keywords to find information, I'm wasting my time. Because the information is available in such short time through the sophisticated search technologies that we have, that it really is a 10 to 15-minute sprint that this digital native is undertaking. Secondly, as we said before, access to sources simultaneously. So bringing them up on the same page, bringing them up on the desktop all at once, comparing them visually as well as accessing that information. Learning in social and digital networks. So as soon as this digital native finds something that's interesting, rather than trying to determine whether it has a sound research basis, he's going to send it to somebody else and say, did you see this? Did you find this? What did you find? Let's send it to so-and-so because he or she's a smart person. Let's see what they have to say about this. So it's networks, both communication networks and digital networks, that enable this particular kind of learning. Here's an important one. Reading images. In other words, you perhaps, when you just step back from it a minute, realize how much information these days is communicated visually. You think of the average advertisement, and frankly, if you turn the sound off on your television and just watch the commercials, you'll understand how powerful images are in communicating meaning. And the fact that we don't recognize that makes us more vulnerable than we would be otherwise. These kids are very sophisticated in understanding visual information because it's so much a part of their life. And then particularly this process. That is the process of finding all of this information, but as they find it, search it, scan very quickly, snip that information, store it, and share it. This is why Julian said to me one time, you know, Dad, I really appreciate all the things you've learned in your long, long life. You tell me all the time about all the things that you've learned, but he said, you've got to admit that you were a just-in-case learner. You know, you told me once you memorized the names of the kings and queens of England. I grew up in Canada, okay? Just in case I would need that information at some point in my life. Of course, you know what happened. There was one point in my life when I needed that information. What happened? I forgot it. But he said, I am not a just-in-case learner, I am a just-in-time learner. So for him, learning is not so much a matter of remembering and repeating information as it is searching, finding, and using information when it's needed, and storing it for future use. So these technology skills essentially mean that what we have in digital natives is a learner who is in control of, and these words are important, an experiential, because it involves other people, experimental process. In other words, he wants immediately to test information he finds with someone else rather than accepting it as received wisdom simply because it appears in a book or in an authorized website. So, in control of the learning process, an experiential and experimental process. Our classrooms are increasingly populated with these kind of learners, and negotiating both the distance and yet the commonality between us is part of the key of learning how to teach in a digital age. That we can utilize to be able to be proper teachers who do not abdicate our responsibilities for students and classrooms and outcomes, at the same time as we take advantage of some of the opportunities that we have that these students bring us. One of the first suggestions I have is the suggestion to leave the stage. That is, if you or I are the sage on the stage, I don't know physically if teachers teach on platforms anymore or not, so I'm not physically suggesting stepping off the stage. It can be done on the stage as well. But it is recognizing that you as the teacher are not, like it or not, the only source of information and expertise in the room. We need to reevaluate where the expertise is in the room. Because while I may have spent a lot of years doing graduate study and gotten degrees and refined the information I know, and it's now hard as a rock inside my head, and people are glad to point that out. My son, last night, has found news that's as current as what happened at midnight and has circulated it to a lot of other friends, and they together have begun to realize that there are some things that happened within a few hours that actually bear on the topic of the day. It's a different kind of expertise. You might say it's a collective expertise. But leaving the stage simply recognizes that there is more than enough expertise to go around. Again, this is not abdicating my responsibility for how that expertise becomes knowledge, or how that learning, if you want to call it as such, becomes knowledge, but simply to recognize that it is there. It is a remarkably fertile and imaginative source of information that we together can use in the classroom to generate genuine learning. So leaving the stage simply means acknowledging, coming to the realization that we all bring some things that can contribute to the life of the class. A couple of key elements, I think, within this idea of leading the revolution. Mark Prensky, the guy who coined these terms, digital native and digital immigrant, has written quite a bit about teaching digital natives. And he suggests that we should not continue to be amazed at what our students can do. We express amazement and astonishment of what they can do. He said we need to start assuming that that's how they do it and creating expectations around what they do. Don't let them off the hook. Put them on the hook for becoming active participants in the class using those technologies for the benefit of the class. So a couple of strategies that you can utilize in leading the revolution are to take responsibility. That is, take responsibility to get familiar enough with the technologies and the environments they're searching to be able to be conversant with them. Go look at Wikipedia. I know you may have a stone in your throat doing, but just do it. Actually go and look candidly at what's there. Critique what is there, both positively and negatively, so you can have some kind of conversation with the students, an authentic conversation about what's there. Look at the citations at the bottom. Who knows, you may find your own work down there at the bottom of the Wikipedia page. Wouldn't that be surprising? So, take responsibility to get familiar yourself with the tools and technologies the students are using and with which they're learning, and incorporate them into your professional and your personal life. So take responsibility, delegate, which means that you now start creating expectations within the classroom for them to do what they do, but to be an active contributor, create expectations for that learning. They've been getting off pretty much scot-free at this point, knowing that nobody's going to pay any attention really to what I find anyway. Create expectations around, dedicate yourself to delegating that responsibility, and finally, don't abdicate your responsibility as a teacher. Help them, and this is going to be as important as anything else, to critically evaluate what they find. If there's one thing that is so desperately needed among digital natives, it's knowing how to think critically and how to evaluate both the quality and the usefulness and the reliability of the information they find. If you're not going to take responsibility, get in there and see it for yourself, it's going to be difficult for you and for me to help students learn how to make those judgments for themselves. In my view, I think we have a very exciting period ahead of us. Tremendous gifts among those who are beginning to use these technologies in their personal lives, educational lives, and professional lives. And we all have the capability to engage them in ways that will create powerful and effective learning environments where the roles of teacher and student still apply.